covering what's going on here nationally and internationally. And as the American media covered the local news and was ethnocentrism and how the Muslims and Arabs and the color, the so-called non-whites, been covered in American mainstream media is disheartening, and it's really happening in the 21st century where people have access to all sorts of information, but we still, our media have their own bias and ethnocentrism. So now and then we talk to the people in international media, and we have today Denis Campbell. He's even running for an office, a candidate in Welsh Assembly, co-host and producer at the three Muckrakers, I always mess that things, and editor and founder of at United Kingdom Progressive Magazine. That's a lot of, a big load, Dennis, to carry on these days. So how you doing? Welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you. Wonderful to be back again. Yeah, what is it? Master of all trades, Jack of all trades, master of none, I believe is the term that's often used, because we do spread ourselves quite thin from time to time. But we started UK Progressive back in 2006. It's 10 years old this coming April. I work with a former BBC Wales anchor and a professor down at Brighton University here in the United Kingdom. Dario Linares and Phil Parry and myself, we do a weekly broadcast called The Three Muckrakers, where we talk about news and information and politics from all over the globe. And I am standing for election in our Welsh Assembly, which is the devolved Welsh parliamentary body here in Wales. 60 seats. Hopefully one of them will belong to me come May the 5th or May the 6th by the time of the ballot.
And tell us a little bit about the politics here in the United Kingdom and in your part of the world. You know, here it's always framed Democrat, Republican, and really not that many options. Tell us about some background about the business of politics in your part of the world.
Well, the business of politics is still left versus right, just as it is there, as opposed to the two parties that you're used to, the Democrats and the Republicans. We've got 5 or 6 or 7 parties, depending on whether you're talking a United Kingdom-wide election or you're talking a Welsh election, which is one of the countries in the UK. Here we have our own Tea Party. They're called UKIP, the UK Independence Party. And as you've seen in many countries here in the United Kingdom, there is a rise of these ultra right-wing nationalist parties. They all tend to behave similarly. They all tend to have similar, fairly nasty, angry makeups. Ours is no different. As you come in from the right a little bit, you then have the traditional right-wing party that would be the closest to your Republican Party. That would be the Conservatives. They're also known as the Tories. As you get to the center line and a hair's width to the left, you have what's known as the Labour Party. The Labour Party were originally the Union Party, but under Tony Blair, they drifted pretty far to the right. So you almost can't tell, whether they're left or right in a lot of their policies. And that's very much like the modern U.S. Democratic Party. So, you've got essentially two centrist parties, one slightly to the right on the moderate side, one slightly to the left on the moderate side, and both of which have very strong lunatic fringe wings, for lack of a better word. On the far left here, you've also got a party, that we would be called the Greens, which pretty much does as it says on the tin. And then you have a nationalist party here in Wales called Plaid Cymru, Cymru being the Welsh word for Wales. So they are the National Party of Wales. They tend to be slightly more left of center than the Labour Party. And we are pretty much a centrist party. We are a party, the Liberal Democrats, who focus on fiscal responsibility as well as ensuring that the social network is cared for and that people are cared for. So, we are probably the only true centrist party that's out there running right now.
And structurally, your system based on parliamentary system, not presidential. Tell us how would that affect the dynamic of bringing issue to the table? Do people vote party line, or they vote based on issues. Like here, 42% they vote Republican or Democrat regardless of who's what and where. There are a few vote issue, they call them independents. Is that how it works there?
Well, there are a certain number of people that will always vote the same party that their parents or their family have voted for generations. We've only within the last 17 years had what are known as devolved powers. If you look at the United Kingdom as a whole, you tend to look at London, you tend to look at the parliamentary system there. And that parliamentary system is the combination of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And it's broken up into 650 constituencies, just as your House of Representatives is broken up across the U.S. into 435 constituencies. We're 650 constituencies, and each country has a certain number of parliamentary seats. Now, all power used to be in Westminster, and countries such as Wales and Scotland and others used to have to wait for a formula, ours is called the Barnett formula, to figure out how much money would come back to them each year in the form of tax revenues and how much they'd have to basically live on. Back in 1999, Wales was part of a new process called devolution, and the Welsh Assembly government was born. So gradually over the course of the last 17 years, a number of powers have been given to Wales in certain areas to tax themselves, to run their own health service, to run their school systems, to fund some of their local government activities. And the list of what we can do continues to grow. And here in Wales, we have this assembly government which has 60 seats, and those 60 seats are largely based on 40 constituency seats, and then there are 20 proportional representation, so-called top-up seats. So I will be standing in a constituency called the Vale of Glamorgan, which is here in South Wales, very close to Cardiff, in between Cardiff, Bridgend, and Swansea, basically, which are our three major metropolitan areas. It's got a couple of large towns, but it's largely rural. And what I try to do is, figure out what the needs of the voters are after 17 years of Labour government here in Wales and Tory government in Westminster.
I know the pressing issue now between the Democrats and the Republican here. The Democrats, it sounds like a hate group, anti-Islamophobia, anti-immigrants, and all of that. Is that part of the dynamic there? The issue has been talked about.
Sadly, it is, Ahmed. And when I look back at the last year. As you and I both know, the situation in Syria is incredibly desperate, particularly in northern Syria, Aleppo, areas that people are literally being forced out of their homes because Bashar al-Assad is literally, his troops are dropping.
They don't even have homes.
Yeah, they don't have homes. They have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
There's something like 2 million refugees in Lebanon. There's another 2 million on the Turkish border. And many of them are in such desperate straits once they get into Turkey. There's a thin strip of water between Turkey and Lesbos, which is the island in Greece where, thousands upon thousands of people, I think, the numbers have grown something like 50-fold in 2015 as opposed to the year before. They risk life and limb to get into these very dangerous rickety rafts to try and protect and save their families. And of course, many of them actually drown. And, that UK Independence Party, which I was talking about, the ultra-nationalists, is of course very much like your Tea Party. Our country is full, go back from where you came from, build a wall, don't let anybody else in. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. As I try to say, imagine you are very lucky to live where you live and you have a very benevolent leadership system, but try to imagine what you would do if Prime Minister Cameron were to suddenly, behave like Bashar al-Assad and start dropping 500-pound gasoline bombs on your homes. You too would head into the very wild waters and 73-mile-an-hour winds today and 10-foot seas and do whatever you could to protect your family, which is what everybody's essentially doing. So
it happened in Europe in World War II, and people move into the same area now, being chased by, in Greece and all of that. So It's
Well, the
not
United
something
States
new.
turned away boatloads of people, trying to flee Hitler.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not an uncommon thing, and unfortunately, what happens with particularly the right wing sort of governments that we have, whether it's UKIP or the Tories, is that they use every opportunity they can to confuse and obfuscate the situation. So people who are truly refugees in desperate situations, who literally just want to have the chance to start their life anew, are being treated the same as an economic migrant, someone who is trying to come into Europe for the sole purpose of either trying to live off of benefits or find work. We find that most of the people that are in these desperate situations, there's several members of our party, Tim Farron, our party leader, a woman who I know here in Carmarthenshire who is running for, I'm sorry, a bit further north is standing for a seat, Jane Dodds. She just went over to Calais to see what the camp situation was like there for the jungle camp that's been set up for people that are just trying to get from Calais into the United Kingdom. And they're truly in desperate situations, and they just want to have the opportunity. I mean, our government has been disgraceful in its behavior, saying we may take up to 20,000 people over the next 5 years. And the scale of the enormity of the situation is such that, Angela Merkel from Germany has taken in 800,000 people, and we're just not doing our fair share as a country, nor are we showing good spirit and care towards our fellow man. I mean, 20,000 people for a city of 600,000 for Cardiff. Our share would be 5 people coming into Cardiff, Wales. Crazy.
I know, and we talked about this before, the 5th anniversary of the Egyptian Revolution was a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And you guys closer to what's going on in the Middle East than here. Here we just push it away. Nobody talks about the Egyptian Revolution or Arab Spring anymore. Talk about refugees and the impact on the devastation, the war happening when it comes here as a form of refugees. Tell us how you guys, the media there, how you guys cover the 5th anniversary of revolution. Are the people paying attention to that at all?
Sadly, no, Ahmed, and it really is very frustrating. I mean, that and the horrible situation in Iran that the POMI face, none of those stories get the attention that's needed, because it's the one thing I find very difficult is that the media tends to go for the bright, shiny, easy to cover object. A dead, washed up child on a beach is an easy thing for them to cover and be able to say, oh, look, we're showing our concern. But the fact is that none of the stories that emerge from this region are black or white. They're not easy yes or no answers. There are so many multiple shades of gray here. I mean, if you look at all of the people that are tugging on various parts of the Middle East and Persia right now, it's a mess. And when you start to line everybody up against each other to try and figure out what their interests might be and how you then cover a story, like, for example, General Sisi now basically being the same sort of a military dictator as Mubarak was, the one that was replaced 5 years ago. Or you look at the current almost death grip that Saudi Arabia and Iran have on the region and various components and parts of it. It becomes very easy if you're with Fox News or Sky News or any of the right-wing talking points to just basically take a broad brush and say, okay, this group is bad, this group is good, this is right, this is wrong. Okay, coming up at 5, we're going to look at, and it really is a disservice because, I look even at the news media here in Wales. When I moved here to Wales 12 years ago, our daily newspaper had a circulation of almost 100,000 newspapers each day. People actually read the newspaper. 12 years later, it's hovering around about 17, 18,000, and everybody goes to the Media Wales website to get their news. And there, they've cut back on all of the reporters, all the journalists, all of the real in-depth, muckraking, investigative journalists that could write really strong pieces, and they go for clickbait journalism. What can we do to get clicks and hits so that our advertisers are happy and we can show that we're somehow viable? So it's all about footballers, their wives, their girlfriends, rugby players here in Wales, and celebrities. And there was a piece on Facebook that we actually put into the end of the podcast where they interviewed some students at Texas Tech University and asked them some of the basic questions that would be a normal part of a civics curriculum. For example, who did we gain our independence from? Who's the vice president of the United States? Nobody could answer that question. Okay, what television show is Snooki on? Everybody got Jersey Shore. So you find yourself. Denver had won. I was like, oh, I really wanted to just, but I got to tell you, it is the way to watch a game, which is to just fast forward in the course of about an hour and you see the plays as they happen.
There was a study by Wall Street Journal that said that they only play 11 minutes for a game of about 4 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's an amazing. It's really an entertainment and economic boost. They talk about millions, $600 million worth of economic stimuli to the whatever state is going to handle it. But you guys into what we call it here soccer and I know football explains America, so big and so violent, so territorial and advancing forward. Everything ends up in disappointment, and that's life. That's really what I love about soccer. It relates to my life more than football. So do people actually get into that and understand what's going on?
Oh, well, here, yeah. I mean, the English Premier League is considered one of the top leagues in the world. Some pretty big surprises with Leicester City being at the top of the table and Tottenham Hotspurs being in second place as opposed to the traditional powerhouses, Chelsea, Manchester United, or Manchester City. So that's been great. A lot of upheaval. But what we're seeing is the cost of the game being priced out of the reach of the average punter, the average person who would go. I mean, in the old days, people, would spend £5 for the weekend and they would stand in the terraces. And we've had histories of, huge disasters of people being crushed by crowds.
Yeah.
Now they all have seats, and those seats cost, upwards. Liverpool had a big protest last Saturday, the Liverpool Football Club, where something like 20,000 people walked out of the stadium when Liverpool went up 2-0 because they're protesting the fact that a single seat price is going to go from £20, which is about $30, to £57, which is closer to $80 next season. And all because of the cost of buying players and keeping them. And even with all the new television money coming in through the new television deal, it's still not going to be enough. So it's starting to look more and more like American-style sports, where it's being priced out of the ability of the average person just to be able to go and enjoy a game with their children or with their family.
It seems like, what you're saying, that England is becoming closer to culturally and politically to the United States. And we were hoping that the populace there in Europe, they are a little bit tuned with politics than back here, and they might, like in France, people don't just send a letter to the politician. The Anglo-Protestant or Anglo-Saxons model that now it's imposing on Europe, there must be a debate what direction Europe is going.
Yeah, and I think part of the, one of the questions we're having here in the United Kingdom is, whether or not to stay in what's called the European Union, the 25 nations now that make up Europe. And we're having it's kind of a fake debate right now that the Prime Minister, the Conservative Prime Minister, is having to sort of keep his right flank appeased and on his side. but the possibility of what's known as the Brexit, Britain exiting the EU, is something that terrifies a number of us, because it's not just a trading partner. It's an issue that affects families very, very deeply. We just had our party conference this past weekend in Cardiff, and some of the people that spoke on this issue of staying in Europe included a young man from Greece who has been in Cardiff, in Wales. It's his home since 2002. So for 14 years he's lived here. He's contributed to the economy. He's a graduate student at one of the law schools. And he says, what do I do? He says, do I then have to give up my heritage? Do I have to give up from where I'm from? Do I have to go home? I talked briefly about the fact that I have what's called a third culture family. Me being originally born in America, moving to the Netherlands with a Dutch wife, we have 3 children who have dual nationality, Dutch and American, now living in the United Kingdom for the last 12 years. What happens to them? Do I now have to go out and buy, essentially 4 British passports if Britain leaves the European Union so that everybody can travel freely? And will we be able to travel freely? Because right now there are no borders. We can go from place to place. If one of us falls ill while we're traveling in the European Union, we're guaranteed healthcare coverage. All of that's thrown up in the air simply because people have these false notions. They say, oh, we can no longer trade with our Commonwealth trading partners. We can no longer trade with the United States. Well, that's absolute rubbish. We can trade with whomever we want to trade. But this is part of the false meme creation of everybody on the right wing. When we had our general election last year, 9 words were said by every Tory politician in lockstep. The SNP Labour-backed government is dangerous for Britain. And they said it over and over and over again, so that people who had voted for Labour, for example, their entire life, were terrified of voting for Labour because they were afraid Scotland was going to come in and take over. Now, that is the fear-mongering based Republican US style of politicking that you see with Frank Luntz and you see on your right wing. You're going to see they want Bernie Sanders, for example, to become the nominee in the presidential election so they can make him and paint him as the bad guy, the socialist, the communist, and use these 6, 7, 10-word phrases to paint and label and scare voters, just as they do on Islamophobia, just as they do on the refugee crisis and everything else. And it's a dishonest level of politics that you've seen in your Republican primaries, a dishonest level of discourse that, quite frankly, there's no place for with the serious problems we all have to address.
I was looking for a place to go or escape to once Donald Trump wins, and I was thinking of coming to you. Now I have to rethink this. I don't know where to go now. I think, what is the place where I'll be safe from Trump? And the only place now I'm thinking about is the library or something. This guy's not gonna. But anyway, Denis, it's been very nice talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing this wonderful insight about politics across Atlantic here. And good luck with your political endeavor and adventure here, and we wish you well. We always, people like you give us hope, and I think we have to just keep trying and trying. That's the only option we have.
Amen, my friend. Amen.
Well, thank you so much, Denis Campbell. He is now a new candidate in Welsh Assembly, and he co-host of an online very interesting. I was on his show, the 3 Muckrakers, and the editor and founder of UK Progressive magazine. So long, and I know it's late, and enjoy the rest of the evening, and we'll talk later.
Oh, thank you, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Salam.
Salam. Bye.